Scott Alexander, welcome to the show. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, great to be here, Nick. Thanks for having me.
So you're the CEO and owner of JIRUS Micro Marketing.
I am. Yeah. So that was labor of love that sort of came out of very interesting experience. And we've been running it now for about 6 years at this point.
So first, tell me about the business. What is JIRUS Micro Marketing, and why did you choose that name?
We're a marketing agency. We work with medical device companies. Think primarily B2B marketing in and around the healthcare life sciences space. I grew up in that space of 10 years at Medtronic, which is a large player in the industry, and then 4 years at Mercy here in St. Louis, running innovation and having a couple of other roles. And I just got to the point where I always wanted to run my own business. I was sort of like an entrepreneur in residence, and it's fun sort of starting up new business lines and things like that for somebody else, but I wanted to see, like, could I do it myself? And so shortly before my 40th birthday, my wife came to me and basically said, like, you gotta quit talking about it, like fish or cut bait. And so I left Mercy back in the fall of 2018, and we started looking for a business to buy. And we had a couple of different ideas, but one of them was marketing in the healthcare space. And so we came across a company that we could acquire that was called iVelocity Marketing, that did direct-to-patient marketing for healthcare providers. And then we were running that. We may get into the details of that because it's kind of a wild story. But short version is when COVID hit, we lost 80% of our revenue in 2 weeks. So from March 16th to April 1st, the business basically evaporated. And we had purchased this through an SBA loan and had our house as collateral and all this kind of stuff. So there's obviously a lot of pressure on, like, you got to pay the bills. And my wife came to me again. You'll figure out through the story that she's a smart one here. But she basically came to me and said, hey, we knew what we wanted to do with this idea of helping medical device companies drive innovation in our industry. That's one of the issues that I saw at Mercy was great technologies aren't always the ones that get adopted because they don't necessarily have the best marketing and sort of commercial plans behind them. And she said, hey, look, like, the business is dead. So you can either try to take off with the employees that you have and the resources you have, try and start this B2B med tech thing, or just call it a day. But now's your shot. Put your head down and I'll tell you if the bank calls the note. So again, this is back like April 1st of 2020. So we're still wiping down groceries and all this kind of crazy stuff, as we're figuring out what the heck COVID is. And it caught a seam. So that's really been the growth story. But you asked about the name. So JIRUS is actually a biblical reference. My wife and I are Christian. Our faith is very important to us. And JIRUS, for those who missed Sunday school this past weekend, JIRUS was a Pharisee. And the short version is the Pharisees are the people that hated Jesus. And JIRUS had a daughter. And his daughter was dead or dying, depending upon which of the Gospels you're reading. And he basically broke rank to go and ask Jesus to, like, hey, help heal my daughter, please. Like, just, kind of put it all at his feet. And I have a son and 3 daughters and this business that was feeding the whole family. And I kind of took the same thing. So we decided we wanted to make it explicitly calling out that this is God's work and I just happen to be the steward here. But so, that's where the name of the business came from as well.
Well, Scott, I mean, there's a lot to unpack there. And I know some of this kind of harrowing story of yours of losing almost all of your revenue and bouncing back. But let's maybe start with your comment about wanting to do your own thing, have your own business. Where did that come from? What were you really looking to achieve by having your own business?
It's just been something I've always wanted to do. And I don't know that I have a great reason for it. It's not that, like, I had to be my own boss or whatever. It just feels like that's the water that I'm meant to swim in. And so that's why, and I'm an innovation guy, right? I love new ideas. I love creating things out of nothing. And it just felt like something that I was kind of built to do.
Well, so your comment there about being innovative and like to create things, then how did you end up going down this path of purchasing an existing business as opposed to, of course, the startup, right?
Yeah.
That's just the two sides of the coin that everybody always juggles.
Yeah. And you'll laugh kind of knowing the story and sort of what happened, but I felt like it was a safer route to go the business buying route than the starting from zero route, which I think in most cases it probably is, right? You have existing revenue, existing infrastructure, things like that. It just happened that we had a black swan that hit us along the way.
So what you did is the fancy term these days is Entrepreneurship Through Acquisition, right?
Mm-hmm.
ETA.
Yep.
did you know of kind of all the formal things that are around this community when you launched going after buying a business?
No, I really didn't. I found out about it sort of halfway through-ish of their communities like Search Funder, and we both know, Will Smith. And so there are podcasts and things like that as well. And no, I kind of learned about it along the way. I didn't really feel like I fit the prototypical mold of what a search funder is. Typical search fund person is graduating from business school, right? Wants to buy a business or run a business as opposed to being an employee, kind of late 20s, early 30s kind of a thing. And my first day in the office was my 40th birthday. And I had 4 kids when or I guess 3 kids, and then the 4th was born shortly after we bought the business. So I didn't really fit the traditional mold. But I will say, especially now, like there's so many resources. It's fantastic to see how that's built out over the past 6 years.
It really is. I always tell people, I wish I knew about it when I was 30 instead of in my 40s, because it's really a pretty awesome path to take in life.
Yep.
So you mentioned also utilizing SBA loan to help finance the acquisition. Can you kind of just help educate people what that means and why people use SBA loans, kind of the potential consequences also?
Yeah, sure. SBA is a Small Business Administration. It's a part of the federal government. And essentially what it will do is they have a funding mechanism called the, is it 7A, 7B, something like that, where there are banks that participate with the SBA and they will loan money to individuals who are buying businesses. And I think the whole idea is to be able to take all these businesses that exist that are being run by folks that are retirement age and make it available to, have folks in the 20s, 30s, and 40s to be able to, or maybe even older, but be able to step in and buy these businesses. So essentially what it does is it mitigates risk for the bank. So we went with CIBC is our bank for buying iVelocity. And essentially we had to put 10% down to buy the business. We had a seller's note, and then the bank financed the remaining portion. If we ended up, and we have bank payments like you would just imagine, if for some reason we defaulted on that debt, one of the provisions is what's called a personal guarantee. And the personal guarantee means that the bank and SBA can come and take all of your stuff. And so when you're 25 years old and you don't have any stuff, like it's not that big of a deal. When you're 40 and you have a house and you have kids and that sort of thing, it's a much bigger deal. And, it's one of those things where I think as in this ETA community that we just talked about, I think it's easy for people to ignore the downside risk of like what happens if you have another black swan event that, absolutely destroys your business. Like, what are you going to do? And so I think, the thing that I would advise folks if they're looking at buying a business is to understand like what really is the downside risk and how you mitigate against that so that you don't end up in this situation where there's a very real possibility that you're going to have to tell your kids that we have to move because daddy made a mistake. That's sort of the potential downside of it.
How much was this personal guarantee part of your discussion with your wife and factoring in going down this road in the beginning before you discovered issues?
Not really much of an issue. I mean, it really wasn't.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, we were maybe a little hubristic in that, she'd been very successful in her career. I've been very successful in my career. The idea that we were going to get in and, have this thing completely get blown up just wasn't really a serious consideration that we had.
Yeah. You've already mentioned your wife quite a few times at this point. Was she part of the search for these businesses? Was she going to work in the business?
The intention was not for her to work in the business. And so she happens to have a background in M&A for a large insurance brokerage. So she had worked for a big insurance brokerage and had been participating in transactions and due diligence and that sort of thing. So she had that level of expertise. But we met in business school. We have the same degree. Like I said, she's a smart one of the two of us. But she was staying home with the kids, and the idea was to continue doing that. And so that's what we wanted to do. When COVID hit, right, and everything kind of blew up, we had 2 people leave the organization. One was our head of sales. And so I stepped in to run sales because I had a bit of a background in that space. And the other was our finance person. And so she had to come in and basically set up all of our financial systems. She actually handled HR as well, which she's not an HR person, but she did it. So she had to step into the business. And today is, I would say, marginally involved in the business. So she's technically our CFO. She probably puts in a day a week just to kind of oversee things. And this is how we pay our bills. And so she wants to make sure that things are going well. But we had her in the business fairly heavily, I should say, up until about a year ago when we started working her out of the business.
So if you're comfortable sharing, What's the story? What happened? Because I think you also had an issue with the seller before the issue from COVID.
Yeah. What happened, I can't go into too much detail, but essentially, we bought the business, and I would say there was some misrepresentation about what was going on inside the business and sort of what the historical trends looked like. And so when we took over the business, we had a pretty significant exodus of clients. But yeah, for example, our largest client, our first month in, the seller got on the phone and started cussing them out. So didn't help with.
That's always good.
Yeah, it hurts. It hurts with revenue, kind of maintenance. But yeah, so we didn't get set up for success to begin with. One thing that I realized too, if folks are coming into this space, is I think it's important to make sure that your leadership style matches what your organization will need in terms of how you manage it. So by that, what I mean is this. So this former owner, very like in people's faces, he would scream at employees. There used to be an in-office thing in Denver. We had an office, and somebody would make a mistake, and he would just like eviscerate them in front of all their peers, screaming at them, all that kind of stuff. And that's like a piece of the sort of the management style. I don't operate that way. I don't raise my voice at customers. I don't or fly employees or things like that. Like we're grown-ups here, so we're going to manage ourselves like grown-ups. And it's interesting because that style was not taken as, hey, this is great, we don't get yelled at anymore, I'm going to lean into it. It was instead, hey, this guy is weak, doesn't know what he's doing, and we basically don't need to take him seriously. It was really kind of how I interpreted it. And so we ended up having to turn over the team pretty quickly because we started to realize that how I'm going to manage the company is not how these people will be able to succeed. They need to have somebody who's going to yell and scream at them to do it. And that's just not who I am. And so I think that was one of the big things.
That's so funny because
Mm-hmm.
my experience is very similar.
Mm-hmm.
My motivation for buying a business was really to prove a people first culture. That's what I was
Mm-hmm.
trying to do.
Yeah.
And so my style, it sounds very much like yours. And, maybe just hearing you articulate that, it is finally clicking for me like, oh, that was the problem. Because they really needed
Mm-hmm.
what I'm not. So
Yeah.
we need to find people like us that you hire adults, treat them like adults, and they thrive.
Yeah. And again, I'm not speaking ill of former employees. I'm saying great things about my current ones, but the fact of the matter is that people, like if you look at the NFL or you look at college football or whatever the case might be as a proxy, you'll have players that really thrive in certain environments and then just fail in others. And it's because they need to be a part of an infrastructure and organization that matches who they are as human beings. And the reality is as a leader, that's what we have to do. That's one of the ways that we can create successful businesses is to find people that thrive in your environment. And you can take people that are super valuable, super capable, super thriving in other environments. But if they're used to a different environment or they need a different kind of motivation than what you have, they're not going to do well in your organization. And I think that's one of the key pieces of leading an organization.
No, I mean, what you're saying is really very interesting to me. So how do you identify the people that will fit what you just described in the interview process, right? I mean, we all know like screening in interviews is like one of the hardest things we ever have to do. And
Yeah.
at least I get it wrong like 50% of the time.
Yep.
I mean, so how are you really discovering this when you're talking to potential new teammates?
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a couple things. There's sort of the technical aptitude, and then there's sort of the emotional aptitude. And the technical aptitude, I have a hard time with interviews. And because I think interviews are designed, it's like people have figured out how to game the system. And so it's almost a waste of your time to be like, tell me about a time when you had to struggle through a challenge. Like the reality is, if somebody doesn't come in rehearsed for that kind of an answer or that kind of a question, they don't really want the job. That's kind of the reality of it, or they're not going to fit well in your environment because you expect that from people. So the things that I look for I'm looking for things that happen outside of the questions that we're going to ask. As an example, very few people send thank you notes after an interview. It blows my mind that people don't do that because I think, are you actually interested in this job? And are you willing to go above and beyond? Which this is like the bare minimum in my opinion, but are you willing to do that? Do you come in prepared to ask questions? You're going to be spending 8 hours a day with us, 5 days a week. Do you care about what the day is going to be like? Like, if so, you should come in and ask questions. What's the day going to be like? What's winning look like? What does losing look like? How do I get promoted? All these, I mean, these are like obvious things that you should be asking. The other thing that we do, and Nick, I'll tell you, like, this is gold. We figured, a colleague of mine and I started doing this back when I was at Medtronic early in our career, and it's a hill that I will die on. We do case studies. So what we do whenever we're going to hire a position, we sit down and we write a case study. Hey, here's a situation. And the whole idea is, how do you approach the situation? So you're going to be an account manager at JIRUS. You're going to have these clients, whatever. Here's a problem that comes up. How do you address it? And what I'm looking for is, how do you address it? Do you have sort of the frameworks with which to address this question or issue that would be common in being an account manager for a marketing firm? So that's number one. But then how do you present yourself? What are the questions you ask to us as the client? Like, how do you basically immerse yourself in the situation and show me that you actually want the role as opposed to just wanting a job somewhere? So those are the kinds of things that I think really help. We don't get it right 100% of the time. I'm shooting for 80%, but those kinds of things. And then there's wisdom in a multitude of counsel, right? So like, let's have them talk to other members of the team. Let's have, 3 or 4 touch points as opposed to just kind of a one and done type of a thing. Those are the things that have helped us to get a little bit better along the way.
I'm interested to learn more about this case study. Is this something you deliver to them in the in-person interview? Is it like homework you give them to come back with? How do you do it?
Yeah. So what we do is we've got a process for sourcing candidates. I have a recruiter that's basically full-time on the team. And so she's out sourcing candidates. She's doing the first conversation. And that's really more traditional HR thing. Like, hey, what's your salary look like? Here's what our overall thing is. If she likes them, then what she does is she has 2 deliverables. One is we have a personality test thing that we use. We use Criteria Core. It's fine. You can use it, not use it. I'm sure there are a million of them out there, but we use that. So we have people fill that out, and then she will email over to them the actual case study. So it's a PowerPoint presentation that we put together, and she'll send it out to them 48 hours in advance of the interview with my COO and myself. And she just says, here's the thing, be prepared to review it with, share your thoughts and review it with, Callie and Scott. And so that's the level of description, but they get an email and it's a physical or a digital PowerPoint. And then they have free reign to do whatever they want. If they want to do, here's a Word document, here's a PowerPoint, here's just a couple of bullet points I'll talk through, here's a puppet show, like whatever they want to do, they can do that to communicate how they would approach it.
Yeah, I think that's a really smart idea. That's a great one.
Yeah.
I'll probably try to adopt that.
Steal away, man.
Oh, just to go back to part of the story, the issue with the seller, you mentioned having a seller note as part of the deal structure, but then after closing, you've got a seller jeopardizing a key customer relationship, which would seem to not be productive for his own seller note.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's logical, but people do crazy things. People do crazy things.
So you had that issue, and then, also the decline during COVID. Was it a decline because of what was going on in COVID, or just happened to coincide with that?
It was driven by COVID. So we were doing a lot of direct to patient marketing on behalf of doctors, dentists, chiropractors, that sort of thing. And dental offices were all shut down. All chiropractors were originally thought to be shut down. A good number of doctors were scrambling because they're getting brought in to help treat patients that have COVID, things like that. And so the demand and people were scared to leave their house, right? We forget we're recording here in 2025. We forget what it was like in 2020 as another piece of it. My wife and I had to move back from Colorado to St. Louis in that 2-week period of time. And one of our biggest concerns was whether they're going to shut down state borders, right? So this was a big deal. And so, at least the medical community ground to a halt as everybody was figuring out what this COVID thing was. And so folks basically said, hey, look, I don't know if I can even see a patient, so there's no reason for me to do marketing. And so they were canceling, and just basically that was it.
How many employees did you have going into this time period?
About 20.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So what did you do in that exact moment, right? So in those first few weeks, you see the revenue declining, you've got 20 employees, you've got a personal guarantee, bank notes, seller notes.
Yeah.
What did you do?
We did a couple things. One, it was clear we had to pivot because I knew that there was this opportunity for helping medical device companies out because I had had a role helping Medtronic, which is a large player in our space, in the medical device space, reimagine the commercial model. So like I had done work around this in 2012 to 2014, and then I've been on the healthcare system side as a buyer of things. I ran half of the supply chain, all the sourcing and things like that. So like I knew that there was this need here. And I knew that doctors and dentists had no idea what's going to happen to their practice. So that's kind of dead. There's this whole concept of like peacetime CEOs and wartime CEOs. I don't know if you're familiar with that, right? So like in a peacetime CEO, you can operate with consensus building and things like that. Wartime CEO, you have to make decisions and just this is how it's going to be or you're not going to be here. And so it was definitely a wartime CEO thing. So I went back, Jody and I had our conversation, came back the next, it was probably a Monday when I came back in the office or came back online with everybody. Cause again, we were in office and then had to go virtual and basically said, here's what we're going to do. It's this, and one or two things is going to happen. People are either going to be on board or they're going to leave. We paid payroll. I furloughed 4 people. So my leadership team, I furloughed them for 2 weeks because I said, hey, like, I don't know what's going to happen, but just know that you've got a job and just have to catch a breath of air. But we didn't lay any employees off. We made payroll every pay cycle and the team rallied. I said, basically, this is what's happened, guys. We have basically no revenue. We're making this pivot. I need you all bought in. And thankfully, a number of the team members like really leaned in. So we had somebody who is on the team who said, hey, I'll build a website. And in 72 hours, he built our website, new logos, new branding. We named the company, like all these things happened just because he was bought in. And I think, and we had other folks that were doing it, but that's probably the most visible piece. And I think really what it comes down to is what we had talked about before, where you've got to get the right people on the bus, right? And the right people will look at this situation and say, okay, so it's not in my job description to build you branding, a new website, all this kind of stuff, but I know that that's what we have to do. And so I'm going to do what I need to do to make sure that we're successful. That's the kind of person that you want on your team. So that's how we did it.
In the team that you had then, had you already gone through the transition of kind of legacy folks?
Yeah. So we were a year into running the business at that point because we closed essentially March 1st of 2019. And then obviously COVID was March 16th of 2020. And so we had done some turnover. It was still a work in progress. So that was one of the things that I think if I had to do it over again, I would have expedited because you start to realize like, if you have a culture that has cancer in it, you want to get all the cancer out as quickly as you can. And so that was kind of it. We still had some people that didn't really fit the new culture, but we basically were probably halfway through the process.
You hear that a lot, actually quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
People say they should have done it faster.
Yeah.
And I always question the concern about knowledge leaving, right? Because you don't know what you don't know as the new owner. You might be concerned these people know some secret sauce. How do you think about that?
I mean, ideally, you're getting into a business where you have some level of understanding of the business or things like that, like understanding the industry at least. But if not, I think the truth of the matter is you don't ever want to be held hostage by your employees. And I think that's the thing that you got to manage is and this is, again, one of the reasons why we have a full-time recruiter, always working on this is like, I don't ever want to be held hostage to my employees, which is not to say that I have employees that are going to hold me hostage, but I don't want to be in the situation where if we lose somebody, it's going to be catastrophically impactful to the business. So I always need to make sure that we have some level of flexibility so that if somebody isn't working out or, something comes on, or we have a big growth opportunity that we can do so. So I think to me, that's a big thing. You should be looking at how do you ensure that one key person leaving isn't going to wreck your business as a key priority as a business leader.
Sure. When you talk about surviving that time period financially, had the business just generated enough cash, like you had enough cash stored in the business to survive, or did you have to put an infusion in?
We put an infusion in, and I'll tell you, we lost $80,000 in May of 2020. Like that's a lot of money to lose. We had, decent working capital. We still had to put an infusion in. And then of course, at that time SBA was allowing people to just pay interest. So we got a little bit of relief from there. But no, it was definitely, I mean, we lost a lot of money in 2020 and even to like the first half of 2021. It just takes time to kind of build the business back up.
I'm also curious about the business as you pivoted. Can you give an example of like your ideal customer? Are you selling just to the big like Medtronics, or is it more like startup biotech type
Yeah.
companies?
So it spans the gamut. Like we don't work with Medtronic, but we work with other medical device companies of a similar size. And we've got, 4 or 5 companies that are in the top 10 largest med device companies, all the way down to like, we've got a client where we're helping them name their products. And for us, like our focus is really around demand generation. It's about sort of the revenue side of things. Like here's the reality, and this is kind of my perspective on marketing and sales, is it's not two processes. It's one process. You have a marketing and sales function that's really should be called commercial. And as we've moved into this more digital world, the truth of the matter is that you and I and the folks that are listening, if they're buying something in a B2B setting, they don't want to have to talk to a salesperson to figure out what the newest features are and that sort of thing. They want to be able to do that on their own and then only engage with a salesperson when they want to. And so what we do is we help to build that infrastructure to match what buyers want, which is I have a whole team that is education driven. So they're copywriters and graphic designers, and they're about creating content to educate buyers into potentially, into a buying experience. We've got, demand generation folks. We manage CRMs. So the whole idea is we're creating this pipeline and then we're reporting on it so that a business leader, it's like yourself, right inside your business, can look at what am I doing to drive growth for my company? Because that's what they want, right? Nobody wants to hire me because we can make pretty pictures. They want to hire JIRUS because it's able to help drive meaningful revenue growth for their business. So with that in mind, that applies to the enterprise clients, right? All the Medtronics, Becton Dickinson's, right? Those, big companies, Olympus, all the way down to like newer companies. And so for us, it's more about what we're doing, not the size of the company with which we're doing it.
Yeah, that's an interesting way that you described it using the term commercial, right? Combining the two functions. I think that's really smart. But you're describing customers, medical device companies, but is the marketing activity you're doing focused on the consumer?
We have kind of there's sort of 3 customer types that we market into. One is, and most of our work, probably 60% of our work is medical device to a provider, doctor, dentist, right? Someone who's actually potentially using it in a procedure, things like that. So that's like 50 to 60% of what we do. About 25% of what we do is marketing to patients. So I have a widget of some type or a service. Like we have hospitals that are clients of ours and large medical practices where we're trying to help patients raise their hand for a medical treatment or to learn more about a particular medical device or things like that. So that's about 25% of what we do. And then 25% is us marketing things into the manufacturers. So de-identified patient data, real world evidence, which is like clinical study stuff into pharma, medical devices, things like that. So that's kind of the third audience, is like actually marketing back into a company like a Medtronic as the customer.
So, I mean, it's obviously my own ignorance about this industry. I'm just curious about a few things. One, I would think these very large medical device companies would have their own in-house marketing teams that do this. So that's part of it. But then if they do outsource, you might just think, well, they're going to pick some giant firm in New York or Chicago to work with. So can you help me understand how you all have been so successful here?
It's my good looks is really what it is. Male model like looks. No, funny random story. So I was a drug rep early in my career in South Carolina, where I'm from. And the former Miss South Carolina was a competitor of mine. She had a drug that was competitive with one of my drugs. And I used to tell the doctors, with a face like this, my drugs have to be good. And so that's kind of the way that I approach it. But kidding aside, what you see inside the enterprise clients is that the industry has changed, and they're big organizations, and they're great organizations, thanks to all my clients. But the truth of the matter is they don't have the latest and greatest skills necessarily in-house, because for them to stay on top of, hey, how's the industry changing? It's just really hard to find people that work in an organization at that scale that are staying up with all the things because that animal in and of itself moves so slowly that, it's just not really necessary for them to do it. So they come to us because we are innovative and more nimble. There is a little bit of that, kind of like you talked about, going to, the big players on Madison Avenue or whatever. I mean, there's a little bit of that, but more and more we're being brought in because we have a different perspective. And really our secret sauce is, I describe us as blue collar strategists. Like, we've done it, right? I've launched an insulin pump across 55 countries for Medtronic, and I've run sourcing for one of the biggest hospital systems in the country. And I have folks on my team that have their own incredible backgrounds that we can bring to the table. We're not the right company if you're trying to sell running shoes to teenagers. Like, that's not what we do. But if you're in that healthcare space, you're going to be hard pressed to find somebody that has a deeper understanding of what actually drives the commercial model forward and can execute it in a way that actually is meaningful and measurable.
Yep. No, that's a really good point about these very large companies being able to stay current in what's going on as the industry changes. So how does your team do that? Stay current on all these rapid changes?
Yeah, I mean, I think we have to, right? Just by virtue of the fact that we've got 50-ish companies that we work with, we're seeing things evolving. We're testing things. We're kind of learning along the way because we have 50 at-bats every day versus some of our colleagues. Like, again, I don't want to sound like I'm speaking ill of enterprise companies, because the ones that hire us are the ones that are innovative. So the rest of you get on board. But, what happens is we've got 50 opportunities a day to try something out. And most of our clients are okay with us, testing things out along the edges. So if you're doing that 50 times a day, you very quickly start to see what works, what doesn't work, right? You can iterate on something and then pull back if it's not driving the value that you want. And again, you're doing it across 50 things versus one. And so the rate of learning is just that much higher.
So what's the punchline? After you made this pivot, you start to recover. What happened then?
Yeah, I mean, it's been 5.5 years since we made the pivot. We are substantially larger than we were when we bought the company, getting close to about double the size, and just we're growing like a weed. I mean, it's, God bless. Like, this is one of those things where there's a big market where our unique expertise is very helpful, and we're just kind of leaning into continuing to grow and serve the customers that we get the opportunity to serve.
Mm-hmm. How did your kind of emotions change during that story? I imagine, of course, extremely stressed, but then, do you come out of it and starting to have fun as a business owner?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's to say that it was stressful as we're making this pivot I don't think that you can sort of emphasize that enough in reality. Like, I didn't look at financials for like 6 months just because I couldn't handle it, right? So I grew up, I'm a runner. I've been a runner my whole life. And, one of the things about running, if you're going to run a marathon, you just got to go. And sometimes it sucks and you just got to one foot in front of the other. And so what my wife, Jody, said was, don't look at the financials. I'll tell you anything you need to know. My older brother runs a big tax practice back in South Carolina and is our accountant. And so the two of them were talking, and there's two of the people that I trust most in the world. And so they said, hey, we'll tell you if you need to know something, just go heads down and just, one foot in front of the other. So we think there's a lot of fear, but there's also sort of it's almost like a resignation of, this is what we've got to do. And so, it's not an emotional thing. It's just, hey, I got a family I have to deliver for. This is what I have to do it. And so as a result, good day, bad day, nobody cares. Like, I have 4 young kids that are looking up to daddy to make sure that we have dinner, and I'm going to deliver for that. And then, once you start to see the systems go, like, our first client was an Israeli company that was trying to commercialize the United States. And just so happened to be that the guy that was running the US business was a former Medtronic guy. And we were in the same business unit, although he was way, way higher than I was back in the day. But I can remember sort of getting the green light and getting the signed agreement and just being blown away and going out and telling my wife, like, we're going to do this. Like, this is going to happen. And you get those incredibly high highs, and, you're also going to get some lows too. But, I think being able to be in the space where you enjoy the people that you're talking to, and you enjoy the work you're doing, like, that's really what fulfillment looks like in a professional setting. And thankfully I've been able to be there for, 5 years out of this.
And I think you're absolutely right. Nobody cares, right? It doesn't matter what the problems of the person in our role is. Nobody cares. Like it really doesn't matter. And one of the things I always say often to my leadership team is nobody's coming to save us, right? There's 3 or 4 of us, and whatever the problem is, it's just, we got to figure it out.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's what business ownership is
Yeah.
you have to be able to trust that you and your team can figure it out. And it's going to be hard and there's going to be sucky days, but it doesn't matter. Nobody cares. You got to do the work.
I bet I know the answer to this, but having yourself live through the story you've just shared, would you recommend being a business owner as a great path in life for other folks to pursue?
I think it comes down to who you are. So there are some really talented people, very, very smart, that like they don't want to own a business. And I would say if you don't feel a draw to it, it's okay. Like you don't have to be a business owner. But I feel like if you do feel that draw, then it's absolutely worth doing. I still do a little bit, but used to coach a lot of entrepreneurs and talk about entrepreneurship to like, the business schools in the area and that sort of thing. And, one of the things that I would tell people is, I'm going to tell you shouldn't do it. Because if you're really meant to do it, you're going to tell me that I'm an idiot and you're still going to do it. So I think it's a great life to live. It can be super rewarding. It can also be super stressful. It's just, it's professional life times 10 is how I would think about it, the ups and the downs. But if you feel drawn to it, then yeah, I say go get them.
Yeah, Scott, I mean, you have an incredible story, and I know it's shared within this ETA community. Other searchers like ourselves have learned a lot from what you've shared. Perhaps in summary, is there one key takeaway that you think we should pay attention to from your journey?
Yeah, I was thinking about this in sort of the pre-call. Here's what I would think about is if you're running a business. I was actually talking to, again, my wife, Jody, earlier last night, as a matter of fact. And we were discussing like business really isn't that difficult. Like if you get into it, it's really not that complex. And so one of the things that I would say is figure out how to boil your business down to what really matters and focus on those things. And the other thing that I would say is ultimately running a business is 3 things. So it's people, process, and tools. And so in that order. So the whole idea is as you're boiling it down, it really comes down to, do you have the right people on the bus and they sit in the right places? If so, life gets so much easier. If not, you could be doing the best thing ever and it's going to be so hard and painful. So get the right people, make sure the processes are there because again, you want repeatability if you're going to grow a business. And then the tools piece, whether that tool is a CRM, it's ChatGPT, it's whatever the next thing, VR, whatever the next thing is going to be, those things are helpful in terms of allowing you to having the right people do the right processes in the right way, but they will not fix the other 2 problems. So I think to me, those are the 3 things that I would think about.
Scott, I think those 3 things are spot on. And from my experience, I completely agree with you.
It's funny how, it's kind of cliche and there's a reason why cliches are what they are is because there's a significant amount of truth behind them.
Yeah. Well, again, thank you for sharing your story. I know there are painful parts of it, but I mean, what a great success story of weathering the storm and coming out the other side. I really appreciate you sharing that.
Well, thanks for having me, Nick, and thanks for the listeners for listening. Hopefully it was helpful. And I think we mentioned it, but like if folks want to connect with me, it's actually Scott F. Alexander on LinkedIn. So connect with me or shoot me an email, just Scott@JIRUSmarketing.com, JAIRUS marketing.com. And I'm happy to be a resource. I'm glad to have kind of been through this. And I know other folks are probably in the bottom part of the J curve. So if I can do anything to help, just let me know.
Thanks again, Scott. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's been great. Thanks so much.